Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Greg Drobnick. He is the co-founder over at Heal. Greg, how's it going today, sir?
Hey, Logan, it's doing pretty good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I am really excited to unpack some key lessons learned in your growth story over at Heal in the journey that you guys have been on lately. Before we jump straight into that, though, Greg, I would love for you to provide a little bit of context for listeners. Give us a little bit about your background and what you and the team at Heal are up to these days.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So I, interestingly, in the last 5 years of being part of the founding team at Heal, have found myself in the healthcare industry, learning more and more every month and having a lot of fun. Prior to that, I actually was in the sports and media world. So coming into healthcare was a bit of a new chapter for me. And when I first heard the vision for what Heal was going to be and has become from my co-founders, my wife and I were actually expecting our first daughter. And so as otherwise very healthy people who frankly didn't interact with the healthcare system that often, we were thrust into lots of doctor visits during the pregnancy and then obviously during birth and then afterwards. And it was really clear to me how inefficient a lot of parts of the healthcare system were operating. And so when this idea was shared with me by our now CEO and his wife, our chief medical officer, this really struck home for me, as an opportunity to make great change in the healthcare system and an opportunity to really help people and discover a new value proposition by doing what is arguably one of the most old-fashioned things in healthcare. We do at Heal, the doctor house call, but we've automated that and created a lot of efficiency in that process with some amazing technology, a great web app and mobile experience, and the chance to be part of that was really exciting to me.
And I can tell you what, having two kids under 10, it's a little bit removed now. When we were at that season that you were just talking about, first pregnancy, first kid. But I tell you what, I am very much a proponent and a supporter of anyone who is increasing efficiency, customer experience, financial effectiveness in the healthcare space. So I think you guys are doing phenomenal work. And I think, that story ties it in really well together, Greg. So we're going to be talking about, the importance of your product and connecting that to your marketing efforts, partnerships, original research, and a few other things that have been really key to your growth and how you guys have gone to market at Heal. Can you give us a little bit of perspective as we start out today, Greg, talking a little bit about the connection between having a great product and communicating that with the market and making sure that the connection between the product that you're building and the benefits that it brings to the market with the message that you're bringing to market at the same time?
Yeah, I think when you're going to market with a new product, there are fundamentally two very important things, right? Now, this is past the discovery phase of, do I believe this is a good idea? Do I believe I should actually try to introduce this, whatever that might be, into the world? But assuming you found the passion and the motivation to march it forward, I think you have to think about two core areas. And the first is, who actually is your user, right? And who is your customer? And then similarly, for that customer or user, what problems are you solving for, right? How are we going to do this differently than other people have in the past? In the case of Heal, we have three core customers or three core constituents, and sometimes we call them the three Ps. And that is the provider, which in our case is actually the doctor who is coming out to see you or your family. The other is the patient, right, which is in fact you or your family or friend. And the third P is the payer. And the payer in our world is the insurance companies. And so what we had to do was identify what problems people were having, right? And people could sometimes make a long list, but you have to focus on the important ones. In the case of the providers and doctors were frustrated by the lack of time they were getting to spend with patients. And when a doctor has to rush, like any other profession having to rush, you don't get to do the best job possible. And so providers wanted more time with their patients and more tools to help them be more efficient caring for their patients. The patient wanted more access to care, right? We've all had a frustrating experience where you might have to go in to see a doctor and you find out the wait time is 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and it's very frustrating. And you might end up in an urgent care center or an emergency room. And so patients want more access to care. The payers, our third P, they want to service customers and reduce costs, right? The insurance company in our dynamic is the one actually carrying the risk, right? They collect premiums, they collect these fees, which then they have to recycle into taking care of your healthcare, which you purchased. So knowing those constituents and defining those ahead of time, in our world, it's the three Ps. In others, obviously, it would be different contexts. But really knowing who that customer is and backing into your product design from that standpoint, I think will allow people to really crystallize what's going to be important in that product and then how to market and promote that product. Hopefully, you're solving the inefficiencies and solving for those problems. If you back into the thought process in that way, define the customer and define the problem, I think you're going to be off to a very good start. And then you get into a lot more exciting tactics of how you scale that and grow that. But that's the fundamentals, right? Because if that is intact, then your product's going to be exciting. It's going to resonate with people in your marketplace, and you're going to have an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. You've got to start with that end in mind. And if that end isn't your end user or your end customer, in your case, you had even more complexity thinking about, these three different constituents that you have to serve, which is, part of the reason that, healthcare faces a lot of challenges that don't have really simple answers. So kudos to you for putting in that work in the early days. Let's talk a little bit about what you alluded to there in that next phase of scaling. I know that seeking out industry partnerships, especially as you mentioned, being new to the healthcare space and the health tech space may have been kind of new area or uncharted territory. And so partnerships have been very crucial for your growth. Some lessons learned that you can speak to there?
Yeah, I think that if you really understand the landscape of what's going on in your industry, you will find there are ways to magnify your reach by creating partnerships. So for us, a big partnership, which we had started working on in the early days and have since expanded in all the markets where Heal service exists, is with the insurance companies directly, right? So the brand names that a lot of people would be familiar with include Anthem Blue Cross, United Healthcare, Cigna, Aetna, the government payer, which is Medicare, of course. And so partnering with those organizations who already had the memberships engaged, right? They already had the customers, and those customers are looking for better healthcare solutions. By partnering with the insurance companies, who in our case had that customer relationship already, it allowed us a partnership of increasing the trustworthiness, right, for a new brand. It gave us more access with targeted data and information. And those types of things are pretty much available in each industry, right? Whether it's, sports or media or technology, whatever industry you're in, there's going to be a core constituency of establishments, right, that are already working with the customer that you want to be working with as well. And if you can find a way to align your value proposition with theirs, you would be surprised how motivated they will become to give you access to their customers, right? And that's something that we've found to be very efficient, both with the insurance companies, as I mentioned, but also Heal works very closely with different employers, right? So in the healthcare world, large employers act as the insurance company sometimes. It's called being self-insured. And those companies we've been able to align with range from Activision Blizzard to Hulu and Fox and GoPro and a number of others. And we actually work with the employer to communicate to their employees, offering great benefits like Dr. House calls, flu shots, annual physicals, et cetera. And that's a great point of convenience for the employees and the benefits team at these companies that want to see them get this sort of extra great service. And so again, we aligned our interests with the partner, and that allowed us to then develop other marketing communications around that. And your reach can be multiplied, in a very short period of time.
Yeah, I love the way that you said that from the beginning of that part, Greg, talking about magnifying your reach. And to me, you pointed out some great ways to kind of shortcut your way to access to the audience that you're trying to reach. If you look for those folks that already have engagement with that audience, and more importantly, as you mentioned, trust with that audience as you seek to build credibility in a new space. And then the other thing to think about that you mentioned there is don't just go to those folks and say, hey, can we have access to your audience, right? Let's find a way to align our value prop to yours. Let's find some win-wins. And then you can do what we've been talking about a lot here at Sweetfish lately is, we go further, faster together than we'll go on our own. And it seems like you guys have been a living example of that. It's part of the reason, in our world, we've been working with B2B brands to launch and produce their own podcasts. But lately this year, we've been bringing together folks that have complementary service offerings that are trying to reach the same audience and helping them join together in a collective podcast so that they can reach that audience together. So it's something that we're thinking about a lot in a very different space, talking about, marketing and podcasting instead of healthcare. But that common thread I can see between the story that we're living out and what you guys are living out and what you shared there, Greg. So I love what you're saying there.
For today's growth story, we'll be talking about Clear Company, a fast-growing talent management platform. Clear Company was acquiring a decent number of users, but they weren't happy with their organic traffic or conversions. Clear Company turned to Directive, the B2B search marketing agency, to help increase their overall search visibility for core keywords in order to drive more organic traffic and bottom-of-the-funnel leads. After identifying the core target keyword and analyzing the first page of Google results, Directive executed a content and digital PR strategy to rank Clear Company number 1 on the first page of Google for the high intent keyword. In just 5 months, that one piece of content generated 27 demo requests and 1,902 referring domains, an all-time high for Clear Company. If you're looking for results like this with your search engine marketing, there's a good chance Directive can help. Visit directiveconsulting.com and get a free customized proposal. All right, let's get back to the show.
Can you tell us a little bit more, the next stage for you guys at Heal was leveraging the data that you had on hand. We've been talking a lot about, the power of original research or data that you have in-house that is custom to you or you have a unique perspective on can be some of the greatest fodder for your thought leadership or your content marketing efforts as you seek to, again, build credibility and trust and awareness within a new audience that you're trying to reach. Can you speak to that as part of the story that you guys have been living out?
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses actually are capturing a lot more data than they probably think they are. We are in a hyper, sensitive space around healthcare, and we're seeing lots and lots of data every single day, with our patients. But I think a lot of businesses in particular are in fact able to capture a lot of data. And it's really a matter of then what you do with that information, right? So if you have a good understanding of the talking points and the value propositions that your customers are going to want to know about versus your clients are going to want to know about, And I think having a clear roadmap and a clear hierarchy of who the different constituencies are, like we talked about earlier, is important. And the reason for that is that they're going to care about different things, right? So if we have, in the context of Heal, if we have a family with young kids, right, like your family, Logan, or like mine, we are going to care as parents about a certain set of information that's maybe more related to pediatrics, right? Because our kids are coming home from preschool or elementary school and they're constantly getting exposed to all kinds of stuff. And so there's certain messaging points and talking points that you're going to want to hit in that audience that would be very different than my grandmother, for example, who might have a number of chronic conditions. She might be less mobile. She's not as tech savvy. And so how you take your data points and communicate those to the right audience at the right time, I think is really an art that we've worked on, both to have that in our consumer communications, but also in our B2B, right? Like we were talking about with the employee enterprise customers or the insurance customers. I think defining what data points are important to those folks and making sure to not try to be one size fits all, right? And I think that doesn't work. In today's society, I think people have, really gotten very targeted, right, about their beliefs and their purviews and their preferences. And I think the more a company can tailor the information and data they're getting to those specific audiences, you're going to get a much stronger reaction, potentially, whether it's looking to onboard a new customer or work on a new partnership. And all of that stuff, right, weaves its way into your communication plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Tailoring that message to be delivered at the right time, which in and of itself is its own challenge. But starting out with getting the right message to the right audience is a separate challenge, and one that I think, has to be table stakes these days for marketers, whether you're trying to reach a consumer audience or a B2B audience, because we've all seen kind of that bland generic marketing, and we know it wasn't for us, right? I spent 10 years selling B2B regionally in the office equipment industry. And, in those environments, we didn't have a marketing department. Sales was the marketing department. And I can remember being pitched by different marketing providers or marketing agencies saying, hey, well, we can do all this marketing and provide this content that you can slap your logo and send it out. And I could just see the kind of generic language, the marketing speak that would not resonate with the customers that I knew very intimately well from having conversations day in and day out with my prospects and my customers. And so it does go back to that first point that you mentioned of understanding your customers and then making sure that you are segmenting your audiences with the appropriate sort of context along the way, which you gave a great example of a parent of a young family versus an elderly member of society within the healthcare space. What sort of information are they going to be looking for? To kind of round out the conversation today, Greg, I would love to hear your thoughts on, kind of looking at industry trends, especially since Heal is within the healthcare space, obviously one that has gone through its fair share of ups, downs, twists, and turns, probably even more so than any industry I can think of just off the top of my head. But at the same time, the rate of change, the rate of industry disruption is only increasing as we move forward. And so I think no matter the company that you're leading or the marketing team that you're heading up, you've got to be thinking about how do we, one, identify the industry trends that are likely going to lead to those sorts of pivot or turn moments, and two, how do we avoid the pitfalls and how do we take advantage of the opportunities there? So I'd love to hear a little bit about your strategy there that other folks could learn from, Greg.
Well, the good news about the business that we've chose and the products and services that Heal brings to market is that we are not really reliant on or affected by the political landscape, for example. There's obviously a lot of changes constantly happening in rules and regulations, around healthcare plans, and it's not a Democratic or a Republican thing. At the end of the day, patients want access to care and they want access to great care, right? And the doctors that we have recruited and made available on our platform do that as good or better than anybody in the industry. And because of the efficiency that we've created with our technology and the platform for doctors to spend a lot of time with patients, offer very unrushed visits, and then use that data like we talked about in meaningful ways, we're creating an efficiency that is ultimately saving money. And if you look at the healthcare costs on a per person or a per family basis over the 80s and 90s, 2000s, and to our present decade, there's a very similar trend there. It's a chart that goes from the bottom left to the top right. Costs are going way up. And so if you're in an industry and you've designed your business model to add efficiency and quality, there's very few external factors that would not have us fitting in a very nice, meaningful way. So there are other industries that can be very, very driven by sort of the political landscape, the regulatory landscape, the pop culture landscape for that matter. But we are at a target point, if you will, that really checks the boxes, for our audience and customers, regardless of the direction of the wind's blowing, if you know what I mean. So I think we're excited about being in that space. The more patients we can reach, the more ability we have to deliver a great product to folks. And we're excited to continue to communicate that and market that. And in addition to the strategies that we talked about, today, we obviously supplement those with paid media as well, right? We like working with our TV and radio and print and PR partners to drive awareness for what we're doing. And we firmly believe that a good marketing campaign has to touch consumers from a number of different areas to be top of mind and ultimately win them as customers.
Yep, absolutely. That balancing act of quality of content and quantity of content that it just takes, as you mentioned there, across multiple channels, no matter the audience that you're trying to reach, is definitely an important facet of any successful marketing strategy these days, and something we've talked about a good deal on this show about. And so you echoing that is just further evidence there, Greg. This has been a great conversation. I love unpacking some of the things that you guys have learned along the way in your growth story there at Heal. Again, just from a personal perspective, I have to say thank you for what you guys are doing in adding efficiency to the healthcare system as a whole. So thank you for that. And also thank you for sharing your lessons and takeaways with listeners today. If anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you or reach out, ask any follow-up questions, or learn more about you and the team at Heal and what you guys are doing these days beyond this conversation, what's the best way for them to reach out?
I would encourage everybody to check us out on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Heal, and our homepage is www.heal.com. And we actually have a great portal where you can ask questions to myself or my co-founders or our team. So we would love to hear from anybody that wants to connect. And the thing I will leave you with, which is kind of a fun thing here, we're approaching the new year and the holidays. Everybody, and a lot of people don't know this, but everybody on a PPO health plan gets an annual physical for free, completely paid for, $0. And our team at Heal is completely set up to do that. So I would encourage you, come January 1, when the clock's reset, to open the calendar year by getting an annual physical. Cost you nothing, and we will come straight to your door, and you can experience Heal for yourself.
That is a great reminder. That's the best call to action we've had all week, Greg. I love it. So thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you making it easy for folks to reach out and ending it with a great reminder. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Logan. That was fun.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.